Hello, friends. My name is host Eric. I'm the host talking with famous people. And today I've got in the room a couple of INTPs, namely Susie and Yubi. And I've additionally got Ace ENTP 783, who may or may not be paying attention to me. I've furthermore got Blanky McBlankertons over here in the left bottom corner, whose blankness astonishes us all with its blankitude. And we're talking about the difference between INTPs and ENTPs. I am an ENTP, which means I very much like to hear myself talk. And in general, I'm a particularly extroverted ENTP, which means I almost never favor alone time, except when it's required to do certain kinds of work. Now, I don't necessarily think INTP favors a lot more alone time. I actually think they rather enjoy being in the company of other like minded individuals. But they sure do talk a lot less than me. I think it's fair to say that. In no uncertain terms, we got another INTP in the room. However, there are varying shades of INTP in terms of gregariousness. Yubi is a fairly gregarious INTP. At least he's interested in talking more when the subject is in his wheelhouse. I think he talks less when the subject is something he feels less confident about.
I
Susie,
agree.
Susie is a very, what's the word? Um, taciturn. Taciturn. She's a very taciturn INTP.
What does that mean?
I was say, you made me Google that one.
It means you don't talk a lot. What does it say on the Google definition of it? Oh, we got another NTP here. We got the NTP party going, rocking here. We're doing for the newcomers. We're doing NTPs versus INTPs as the topic, and I was distinguishing between different types of INTPs. I was saying Yubi's fairly talkative, but it's about a subject that's in his wheelhouse that he feels really comfortable with. But in general, is less talkative about stuff he feels less comfortable with. Susie's very taciturn. Did I use the word correctly?
Yeah, taciturn, adjective of a person reserved or uncommunicative in speech, saying little. Untalkative would be a synonym
Mm-hmm.
for unforthcoming.
Neptune is one or the other. He seems, I think he's less talkative with me around than in other contexts. Okay, I'd like to hear from the INTPs now about what they consider about their own degrees of talkativeness and how they consider talking or engaging in discourse like this to play into their overall self identity and or things they have fun with and or whatever. So let's start with Yubi.
I think I think it definitely depends on the environment and my mood. So if sometimes I can just be in a fun mood and like I'll participate in any discussion, no matter like if I think it's in an which in another point in time I could go into that same discussion but be in a different mood and not really and think that just just not really care to participate in that discussion. So it's honestly really depends on my mood kind of. And then if something is definitely in my wheelhouse, as you said, like something that interests me, then yeah, I want to talk about it.
Okay.
I like discussions that like kind of I guess have a purpose or have some weight to them. Like right now, since we have a topic and we're kind of on it, I kind of want to participate a little more rather than like if we're in a room and the conversation is just kind of going back and forth and there's really nothing being said. Like people are just kind of making jokes and it's like for a while that's fun, but I get bored of that. Like there's no like content,
Okay.
I guess.
So you
So
like you like the language to be purposeful in the sense that you're making progress with generating and refining ideas.
yeah,
Susie,
most of the time.
Susie, you are, uh, as I said, taciturn. Would you self-identify as taciturn?
Should I even respond to that?
I don't know. Do you want to?
Well, it's similar things. as you be, and also I consider who I'm talking to. And of course the conversation, like if there's just something going nowhere, I might sit around and listen, but it doesn't really tempt me to participate.
Would you also say that you probably talk more with other people than you do with me because I talk so much?
Of course, that's true. But I also talk a lot more with you than some people.
Okay. So that's another factor to consider is that as an ENTP, when I talk about INTPs not talking that much, it's it's reflecting my interpretation of a discursive space that I've already mostly filled. So it does tend to limit their ability to contraindicate that. Okay, so Neptune, you're somebody who you're not sure if you are an INTP, if you are an INFJ potentially. Um, I've operated under the assumption you were an INTP for a long time. I. What do you think?
I prefer conversation where I'm not so eager necessarily to tell people what I know or like state an opinion all the time unless I'm purposefully being provocative. Usually I'd prefer to ask questions and then take other people's perspectives, sit with them for a really long time, and ideally turn it into a diamond. But that diamond never really appears. So I'm constantly just I prefer to take like the observer stance in conversation, which is why I ask so many questions, so that I can have a more like well-rounded opinion of something. So usually it can come off like I'm interrogating someone when really that's my idea of conversation.
What do you guys think about relating to what he's saying regarding questions? Are you more inclined to make statements or ask questions?
It depends, for me at least. I'll ask a lot of questions if I feel like the person that I'm talking to can't take statements, or that I need to be more like, or if it's a topic where I don't feel like I know a lot or I need to ask questions. But if it's something where somebody says something and like I really think it's wrong, or I really like, then I'll just usually speak in statements or in my opinions.
Yeah, I think NTPs tend to be statement makers in general, more than questioners. So that tends to make me lean towards Neptune potentially being an INFJ, who tend to be questioners more than statement makers. Would you guys agree with that general depiction of INTPs and INFJs?
Yeah, I can't agree with that as a generality, no.
ENTPs, either you guys want to chime in here if you guys are paying attention, Jacob and or Ace? Is Jacob only playing chat?
Wait, what happened?
I'm asking if either you guys want to chime in on that.
What, on what? What happened? What was the statement?
Never mind. You weren't paying attention. We've been having
No, just hit me, no, just repeat. I got it.
Because it's not about a specific statement. It's about this long series of us
The
talking
flow.
about ENTP and INTP for the last, I don't know, 10 minutes. And then I said, do you guys want to chime in? But
Oh, like the whole thing on like he doesn't want to talk unless he feels like it's interesting to him and people actually want to discuss it. And
INFJ is more likely to be questioners than statement makers.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's a good generalization?
I would say probably so, yeah. Although keep in mind I am fairly new at MBTI compared to all of you guys.
Hey, Blakey, is that Jessica? Jessica, Blakey, are you Jessica?
I don't know. I find with INFJs that I know of, like, yeah, they're super inquisitive when they're trying to get to know somebody at first, or when they're kind of like the whole maybe first couple months you know them, but or if you're talking to them about some emotional problem you have or some situation in your life, or you're maybe asking for advice or something, But otherwise, if you say something and they have kind of a TI framework about it, they're not scared. They're usually, in my opinion, usually pretty blunt about stating their like how they feel about something or how they view something. Or I don't know.
And I feel like NI would be a more certain. There would be more certainty to NI dominance than TI. So I can't say that the questioning thing is necessarily NI NFJ versus INTP thing. Like I can't say which, because from my observation, NI is more confident in itself than TI.
Well, that's true. I mean, I
Because
think
even INTPs tend to be type 5s an Enneagram, which is the person who hoards information because they never feel like they're prepared or have the right conclusion.
right. I mean, I think the risk of TI is to devolve into nihilism. The risk of NI is to become Hitler. So, it's they move in opposite directions in that regard. TI defeats itself in terms of certainty, and NI reinforces itself. But see, NI isn't really a way of making judgments so much as it is a way of knowing things. But as a way of knowing things, it's very judgy because it's about knowing
I
what's
was
true
gonna
and
say
right.
I kind of like hate. I know you weren't saying this, but I kind of hate that depiction of NI because you can't separate NI from other things. Like so, it's always tied to a judging function. So like when I run it into NI DOMs, usually they have way stronger opinions on things than I do, even though I'm a judging DOM. But like a lot of the time I see that they have this worldview that they've created, and they've created it over a long period of time, like their whole life. They've just built building blocks and deconstruction of how they view the world or how they view something, and it's like, and they're pretty strong in those opinions. Usually that's what I run into. I don't know, like I wouldn't say I have ideas and opinions about things and about stuff, but I wouldn't say I don't feel like I have such a strong worldview as I run into a lot with NIDOMs.
Well, I think the reason is because our respective epistemologies focus on different things. So SI, which we use, it's about remembering what happened before and about constructing an event chain in time related to the self and stuff like that. And SI allows itself to be SI, especially tied with TI above FE, means that you know clearly that past experience is not always a good guide for future outcomes, and that you may be able to use SI to guide you based on reference points from the past and stuff you've learned. But you also know that it's an imperfect system. NI, in contrast, knows what's true and right and obvious and certain, and it's almost always right. It involves things that it pairs a lot with SE. That's why it's paired with SE, because you know something and it's pre action knowledge. It's pre knowledge. It's a shit you know without thinking it through at all. So it's like the example I like to use for NI is when I was in the car and this car in front of me, I knew I was in a bad spot because he looked like he's got the feeling that he might want to come over. I was in probably his blind spot, and I was going at a speed that was sort of getting up past his bumper, but it's really slowly. And so I was in a bad spot to be doing something, not because I had any indication anything bad was going to happen, but just sort of a sense that, oh, this is dumb because he's going to come over here. And so then I ended up slowing down and going around him or whatever. But the point is, I knew all that without thinking any of it through. I just sort of got the gist of this situation, this complicated situation of variables in the car, and then I SE took action on it. That's the way that epistemology and action function work together to almost bypass the judging functions. Whereas TI is the exact opposite of that. TI goes, let me make sure I got all this first. you know, let me make sure I understand why I need to slow down and go over here and come over and pass this guy before I actually do anything. It's deliberative rather than reactive or active.
Yeah. I guess it's hard for me, or just using that specific example, it's hard for me to kind of agree, I guess, just because like I'm really physically active and like very physically inclined with whatever it is, driving, sports, whatever it may be. So I don't see TI as a problem there, and that as something that like hinders me or like where I'm always questioning something. I don't know.
It
But
doesn't.
I'm just
It
using your
doesn't.
specific example.
I'm just saying, in that instance, you're not using TI. If you were using TI, it would be a bad time to use it, right? To go.
Yeah, I get what you're saying in that instant. Yes. Yeah.
So the reason that NI is more certain than TI is because NI doesn't stop to think about it. But NI, it's wrong. I think it's wrong to compare them because NI is, like I said, I think more of an epistemology, and I think TI is an evaluatory function. NI doesn't question its own conclusions at all, but TI does. And even FI would go like, well, I might feel differently later. FE acknowledges the wobbliness in its interpretation of things. But our epistemologies, SI and NI, they don't function with an understanding of wobbliness. They don't say, well, my memory might be wrong. You operate on the assumption your memory is right for most things. I mean, there might be some things that you factor in. Well, that was a long time ago. I don't really remember that clearly. But for most obvious things, like I remember that I saw Folgers on the shelf at the Circle K when I thought they didn't sell ground coffee. I noted one time, last time I went down there, I was like, oh, they do sell ground coffee. There it is. And I remember that, right? So next time if I run out of coffee and I want to go to Circle K and get grounds, I'm going to go, they do have them. And I won't sit there and go, is my memory of this correct?
Mm-hmm.
You know, NI works the same way, except it's about truth and right and beauty and stuff like that. And so, that's why it's kind of judgy or something. That's what I think anyway. It's just my theory.
I get what you're saying there. It's definitely harder to articulate, a little bit harder to give examples for NI because it's not as tangible.
Right. SI is the physical epistemology, and NI is the metaphysical epistemology. So it's like we have 3 metaphysicals and 1 physical. And the physical for ENTP is in the 4th slot, so that's why we're just such a mess in the physical world in all capacities, whether it be TE, SE, or whatever, or SI. You know, our way of knowing the physical world is we attend to it very little.
Are we still recording our INTP, ENTP differences?
Yeah.
Okay.
So somebody wrap it up. Give me a nice summary. Susie, provide us a summation.
Start talking about ENTP.
Damn! Hit him with it, Suze!
Start or stop?
You never said anything. You just kept going about INTP.
And
then
INFJ. I talked about INFJ too.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
That long rant was mostly about NI and SI.
It's relevant, I guess. Well, okay, INTP has NI. A lot of them will claim to be very NI heavy. And I think, in a sense, they are because they're tending to focus on the right moment, the exact right action in a given moment to make a singular stroke with a sword to do the damage that ENTP does, going like chop, 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 right? That's sort of the INTP at their optimal state is accomplishing the same things the ENTP is accomplishing with a lot less energy. At their least optimal state, they're waiting too long and not pulling the trigger when they should. And then at that point, you know, they get. I think some INTPs sort of get behind the 8 ball and start neurosizing out about shit rather than just pulling the trigger on shit. But I mean, I don't think either of you guys fit into that category at all. I think both of you guys are pretty well optimized. You seem to have gotten past whatever 7th slot SE normally can render some INTPs like broken in a way. If they can't ever get off their butts, like to, I mean, the thing is, they want to accomplish that identity thing. So, I mean, there's a good bridge to talking about ENTPs. So, okay, we want to accomplish an identity thing too, but we have no idea what the fuck we're doing with it at first. So, whereas like INTP goes, all right, let me look down here. What do I want this section to look like? I'm gonna like Zachary, for example. He did the TwFP thing for a while. He did a certain amount of videos. They were all like mostly like hits, you know, and they were spaced fairly far and few between. And then he pulled out because he realized it's like, okay, he didn't want to be segueing into what it was becoming exactly. And he had, in my mind, he had set up his own identity as like, okay, boom, that section's finished there. That chapter's done. I've got myself defined for that chapter of life in this particular area as this. And I think INTPs like that sort of thing. Whereas in contrast, I'm still trying to...
I want you to like clarify on that a little bit. What do you mean by that? Like you're saying the reason he pulled out is saying you think he just said, okay, that chapter of my life is done. That is what I was there. I'm trying to understand exactly what you mean.
When he's evaluating the thing, he's evaluating it from a personal identity build perspective more than anything else. He's saying, well, like he's making a decision about it, basically. He's sitting back and making a decision about it. He's making a decision by comparing to some sort of model of how the self presents ideally, how the self presents in the status quo, what possible ways one might branch off this existing status quo thing, and blah, blah, blah. But, you know, and also he was factoring FE things where it was, you know, I was doing a lot more shit than he was, even though his stuff was way more impactful in a way. It made it a challenge because I was trying to get him to be more active, and, you know, it became complicated enough that the net impact calculus resolved it such that he wanted to close the chapter cleanly, you know? And so he did close it cleanly. And
Gotcha.
And now he enjoys what the INTP in him probably anticipated, but maybe didn't, which is the sort of ability to come back in and receive this status as sort of a TwFP pioneering person and a archetypal INTP, you know, who's made the video that still gets the most views every month of every video I have on here, which is how to tell if an INTP likes it.
Yeah.
It's still number one. I just checked the stats today for the first time in a long time. Last month, what was the number one video with most views, most watch time? How to tell if an INTP likes it.
Apparently, it's a difficult question.
Well, the thing is, there are 4 types that do the most YouTube video watching about typology. And that's INTP, INFJ, INFP, and ENFP. Those 4 types are the most watching. Probably ENTPs too, but I mean, I think I have so oversaturated the ENTP video market that if you're an ENTP, you've already long since watched your fill of ENTP videos. Okay, any additional comments here on the INTP ENTP thing? I didn't really finish what I was saying about the ENTP in contrast. So, like, we're not very good at keeping track of our own identity, who we are. We don't know how other people feel about us. Still can't really tell in general. It's like I get the sense when something will be successful to a group, like, oh, I think this will play well in front of a group. I can get that idea, fine. But how individual people feel about me is a tricky thing for me to understand. It's hard for me to feel as though other people's positive emotions towards me are legitimate or meaningful or something like that. And so I think that's why I probably why I do so much stuff is because I don't know what else to do or something. But I'm starting to define myself a little bit more clearly. Like the channel becomes more well defined as a entity, it means I'm becoming more well defined as an entity because really it represents the slow and sloppy optimization of Eric, which is both slow and sloppy. Whereas INTPs are not sloppy in comparison, but INTPs have at their disposal a totally legitimate and authentic obliviousness that can I think people lets people be more forgiving of us than they might otherwise be, and also that allows us to allows me anyway to continue to operate in a world where I assume everybody's good and decent and well-meaning and kind and everything. And all these good and well-meaning and decent and kind people continue telling me how gullible and oblivious I am. And yet I continue to not encounter these hordes of barbarians who are coming to cause harm to the city. At any rate, I don't know if that was very explanatory about ENTPs. Why don't you guys talk about ENTPs?
I don't know. I mean, compared to INTPs, I mean, I definitely see the similarities. Like, we speak the same language. That's the biggest one. We speak the language of ideas, and like we're good at interpreting symbols apart from the definition. Like, no matter what words are used, we're pretty good at parsing out the meaning of those words. I think both types are good at that. But I definitely see a huge difference too as far as where ENTPs kind of aim their attention and where INTPs aim their attention. So that just being extroverted and introverted probably is a big difference. Or like ENTPs definitely seem to aim their attention at the world more and have a larger and broader TISI database to me than INTPs do actually. I feel like they actually have a larger library a lot of the time of random collected information. And the INTP spends a little bit more time refining that library, maybe, or purposely blocks. You know, if SI deems something important, then it'll go on collecting information on that topic for however until it deems it has sufficient information. And if your attention is focused on something so heavily, then naturally you're going to have decreased attention in other areas.
That's a good rule to remember across the board for cognitive functions. So let me ask you this question then. That psychosophy thing that Luna, another INTP, linked me to, indicates basically that, according to that system, it talks about what you prioritize. And it says that I prioritize emotion first, and that my primary way of accomplishing that is with logic. So, in contrast, you got the one with logic first, right, Susie?
Yeah.
All right. So, do you think that ENTPs primarily prioritize emotion first?
No.
You don't think so?
No, I don't think so.
Do you think I prioritize emotion first?
No, that's for sure.
I do.
Yeah, FE, but not FI.
I prioritize FI most of the time.
Your own feelings, your own values.
No, other people's feelings. I do. Look, just because. Listen.
Yeah, but the same thing can be said about anyone, really, whether they're good at it or not.
I was gonna say, kind of in that same context, I could say I do the same thing. Like, I give a lot of attention to FE, or you can call it, you can say FI, whatever interpretation you're taking of it, other people's feelings, and
Yeah,
making sure that I am good to their feelings.
but this is contrary to how you say that INTPs are more gracious in that way. We step into less crap because we're more careful. So it has nothing to do with functions, that test. I kind of disregarded it.
Well, I know it has nothing to do with functions. There may not be a correlation. It may just be me. I do think I prioritize emotional stability or emotional well-being, everyone's happiness at the end of the day more than anything else. Like, for example, what I mean by that is like Socionic says, I prefer a merry atmosphere. We can have a big argument and we can remain disagreeing at the end of the argument, and it's not going to have any impact on my merriness with you going forward. You know. So in that regard, I do prioritize the emotional well-being of things. Like, my primary concern, in some sense, is that the games stay on the field. That the fights are games. That we don't actually have real fights where we don't actually like each other. You know, the thing is, maybe it's true that everybody's like that. In which case, it would be irrelevant. But I mean,
I would say,
know. Go ahead.
I know I can agree with that as far as like wanting a merry atmosphere, or if I get into a fight with anyone in my like real life or whatever, most of the time it's me after the fight. It's me spending a lot of time letting them know it's okay. I'm not mad at them now, or like it's okay to feel safe and again, or you know what I mean, like trying to smooth it over.
I will not
because...
stab you again. I promise.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, I don't like big fights or anything. Anyway, so biggest difference between the ENTP and INTP, I think we go about our identity builds in an opposite way. You guys try to make careful decisions. We try to make lots of decisions and pick out the good ones. And it sort of works that way discursively. It works that way in terms of life choices. It works that way in terms of choosing a favorite brand of cereal. You guys probably go in the store and you look and you try a few and you decide on one and you probably stick with it. Do you stick with one brand of cereal?
I have a couple that I swap between.
Okay.
A few.
I also have like 2 I actually buy.
Okay. Sometimes I buy cereal, sometimes I don't buy cereal. When I do buy cereal, I might buy grape nuts, I might buy honey nut cherry, I might buy any number of different possible cereals. I might buy that cereal I've never tried before. Who knows?
Me too. I mean, I have some that I swap between, but I haven't bought cereal in like 2 months. And sometimes if I see like a new brand or something like totally different and it looks like, I'll try it. Just depends.
Your guys' SI is not notably. It's like it's not really visibly that much stronger than ours. It's invisibly stronger. It's like in the visible shit, you guys are kind of messy too, and you know you dress like this too, and you do have the same style. None of the NTPs gives a fuck about that shit. You know, that's what makes us my favorite type.
Yeah.
People fuss about stuff that doesn't matter all the time. INTPs get that it doesn't matter. A lot of other types don't necessarily get that. But that's not relevant to the actual job at hand, this little symbol that you want us to engage in. It's something INTPs understand. Whereas other types might be like, but that's the rules.
What I've noticed with, at least, I'm just really drawing a lot of this from 2 good ENTP friends that I have in real life, but I've noticed with SI, with the ENTP versus the INTP, it's like, and the same with FE, the last 2 functions. the last function, they seem to be more like, it seems a lot more raw, and that the information that they receive from that function is more raw. Like, so like the ENTP, my ENTP friends, I feel like with FE compared to me are kind of more like mentally more adept at it or better at it in situational like context. But like my FE data is the emotions that I get from other people a lot of the time are like very raw, and I soak it up. Like I get it. It's like just like with my NTP friends with SI, all of them have like better palates than I do. And when we're in a room, they notice smells quicker than me and stuff. Like they'll say something, and then then after they say it, I like the information hits me, and I'm like, oh, like things like that, or um,
But
they
that's
like
not
sometimes they
SI.
have.
That's just being extroverted versus introverted. Because the extroverted intuition is always scanning the environment for things
But
to build off of. Or
so
we're
that,
stuck in our head building off of something we've already built off of.
yeah, I mean that's kind of what I mean though. Is I think that that axis, if you're accessing NE all the time, NE pulls off of NI or SI. So like you're probably accessing those two functions all the time, like a lot.
That's how you use it. That's not how we use
What do you
it.
mean?
Because, okay, like,
Okay.
to us, NI and SI are mutually exclusive.
I didn't get
I mean,
that thing at
NE
all.
and SI are mutually exclusive. If we're NEing, we're not SIing. And what I mean by that is, for us, NE is a way of being that causes us to imagine all sorts of possibilities. SI is the relief from that way of being, in which we're no longer imagining possibilities and we are simply curating that which has been done. I'm extremely SI avoidant. That's why talking with famous people is the way it is. I don't want to deal with any of the curating shit. I don't like to be in SI at all. The only kinds of SI I like are the physical kinds of SI, food and warm shower and bed and stuff like that. I like that kind of SI, fine. But I'll feel good if I do task SI, like pay bills and shit like that. It'll make me feel accomplished for a few minutes. I don't know. It's like I hate it in principle because it's maintenance. I don't like shit that's maintenance. I want every piece of work to create an object that has permanent value and long tail worth, like a video, at least in theory, does. It turns out that, how much effort you put into polishing it makes a lot of difference. But of course, as an NTP, I think that's a stupid irrelevancy, and so I don't want to deal with that shit. Of course, it's not actually irrelevant, but it's only not irrelevant if you value TE, which I don't. So I'm kind of fucked in that regard. That's kind of the problem with being an ENTP. And that's a good ending to the video. Thanks for watching Talking with Famous People. Don't forget to eat plenty of cheese. And if you enjoyed this, you should join us sometime in Talking with Famous People. It's a raw room here. It's at peer.n/TWFP2. Rock on.